Welcome to the Rewild Gear Podcast. Modern life, society, and responsibilities have domesticated us. But now it's time to rediscover your adventurous side. Whether that's camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, or just spending time in the great outdoors, this is the podcast for you. Join us as we get back to the wilderness and rewild. Welcome to the Adventure Made Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Spears, and I'm here today with Reuben Bolieu. Reuben is an adventurer, a writer, a photographer, a musician, a world traveler, and a survival instructor for Randall's Adventure and Training, who are also the makers of Essie Knives. Reuben has spent most of his life hiking and backpacking through the wilderness of the world. He has traveled abroad in extreme environments, from the cold climates of Alaska to the desert heat of Egypt and Jordan and the humid conditions of Southeast Asia and South Africa. He continues studying survival techniques, construction, and the uses of knives and edge tools from places such as South America, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, New Zealand, and numerous countries in the South Pacific and Scandinavia. Reuben is a part-time knife designer and created the Tops Knives Cub and the Essie Knives RB3. He has published many articles on survival, knife and tool use, woodcraft shelters, and remains a lifetime survival student. Reuben and I also had the chance to connect at SHOT Show earlier this year, and we had a great time just conversing about outdoor travel experiences, knives, and everything wilderness related. Reuben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Seth. Good to be here.
Super. Yeah, so we had a lot of fun just chatting, me, you, and my brother David at SHOT Show.
Sure did.
We talked a whole lot about knives and the outdoor industry and some of your crazy travel experiences. So just to dig in, how did you get into kind of the outdoor industry? Because it's pretty diverse as far as being an outdoor survival expert and knife designer, outdoor writer, adventurer, all of these different things.
I agree. There's so many different places where somebody could fit in, or many different things somebody could do. Like anybody else, I think it always starts when you're young, and just growing up in Southern California, we have a lot of big mountains, beautiful mountains there. And hiking with my grandfather and my brother, my cousins, we did a lot of camping. A lot of camping where you could just drive down mountain roads until you couldn't drive anymore, and you get out and carry what you can and set up camp. And it was a good time to be in the forest then. And I really enjoyed being at the high altitude. And for me, that meant a lot, because I went on to doing a lot of different high altitude type of hikes. And I still to this day enjoy high elevation, long backpacking trips. But it definitely all stemmed from the old camping days with heavy cast iron and just ungodly heavy ice chests, and because it was just there for fun. You know, we were doing it for fun. It wasn't like I was doing any expedition. Although it seems like that when you're a kid. That really just kind of led to me wanting to go my own way with my gear choice and trip choices, and I started just doing a lot more, I would say, long distance. Like around high school time, started doing longer treks, not just car camping. I really don't have a place at car camp these days. I lose my mind with people, the noise, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you do your best to keep it clean. For keeping critters away and animals, there's always going to be the person next to you or across from you that just leaves everything out and defeats the purpose. And I don't care for the crowds, the noise. And I think I just enjoy the outdoors in a different way. That being said, I seem to fall in a lot better with the backpacking community, where you don't have to be in one designated square place. Sometimes you have to. When you're doing big climbs, there's a base camp, and that's understood. But it just really got me doing a lot of hiking trips, backpacking trips that were meant to be quick, fast, peak bagging, as they call them, just to get up and see the view of a high peak. And in Southern California, we have several peaks that are above 10,000 feet that are amazing to see, to camp on, to camp in. It was probably the most important time for me to get into outdoors, skills related things, because when you're just backpacking, you have a great understanding of gear that you carry. And when separated from that comfort zone, that pack, it's a different thing. It's a different thing. And having things on you that you could signal, make fire, do basic survival tasks on you, with you, is rare for most backpackers and hikers. I think you can relate to that. Some people might just be going out for a quick day hike, and just because of that, or if it's a close car camping trip, you get complacent and you don't really think you can get turned around and not be seen for days or hours or a week or worse. That just led to practicing skills and trying to get better base of skills out of whatever I had, and still trying to keep very lightweight. All that backpacking and those types of trips just got me doing a lot of things in my area in Southern California that I was pretty happy with physically, because there were challenging times. Eventually, I believe it was my cousin who asked me, what are you going to do next? You just did Mount Whitney up and down. You did Grand Canyon up and down, and Gorgonio and San Jacinto, that are all about 12,000 feet peaks, I think. Yeah, about that. And it was just kind of like running out of cool, big things to do about 2006, 2007. And I always wanted to go on this jungle survival trip. I used to see a little ad in a magazine for, that was with Randall's Adventure and Training, where they take a group of people, and it just looks like a pure punishment for 14 to 16 days, long treks and things like that. But I think for most adventurers, most people who like this kind of community, I don't just mean backpacking and hiking. I mean people who really like the outdoors, the adventure part of it, maybe the romance of it. Somewhere in their head is the jungle. And to many people, that is like the ultimate, the pinnacle of some type of outdoors adventure, a great trip. And for me, it definitely was. I had thought about it for almost 10 years when I finally called the number on the ad. I believe it was Tactical Knives magazine. I talked to the co-owner, Mike Perrin, within 10 minutes. You don't call that number and need someone to convince you. You already have your mind made up. And it didn't take much before it signed me up. And lucky for me, there was a class going about 3 weeks from that point. I remember it was November 2007. And I was very excited to go. And on that trip was other co-founder and owner, Jeff Randall. Now, at the time, he had been a magazine writer, a photographer. I'd probably been reading his work for about 10 years and looking at his reviews and then trip reports. And he was great. He had created this place where he could do these trips, take people out, educate them, give them a trip, take gear and use in that environment, write articles about it. So that's really what got me interested in the trip in the first place. And on those trips, you can spend, and this is no exaggeration, 8, 9, or 10 hours on a small boat.
Wow.
Just going down the tributaries, down the Amazon first, and then the tributaries, finding a place. This is with 3 or 4 breakdowns and a hammer and a screwdriver and a machete, kind of doing the Fonzie from Happy Days approach, banging on it to get it to work before you get to your camp spot or where we're going to start holding the classes. You get time to know each other and talk. And it was Jeff Randall who encouraged me to maybe get with some of these magazines also and do what he was doing. And at the time, I didn't know anything about a camera or writing. But I was writing a lot on forums, over these outdoors forums that a lot of us were on, a lot of writers, designers, people that have kind of come up over the years and doing the same sort of thing. we would post on forums our weekend hikes, our backpacking trips, gear that we liked, gear that we recommended, gear we hated. And we were doing reviews in our own way as if they were kind of like magazine reviews, just because we had learned from that, and doing them on a different scale, lots of photos. And so he had seen some of the stuff I did for various forums and thought that that type of reviewing would be good for the magazines. And that is how that's how he roped me into the outdoors industry. From that point on, I was writing for magazines and doing photos for them. He got me a photo gig with SWAT magazine at the time. Another writer named Jerry Van Cook was doing an article on then Rat 4. And I did some field photos for them and got my first, photo magazine credit in SWAT magazine. And all I had was a point and shoot camera. But I learned early on from him that if you have good lighting, that's pretty much all you need. And it really just come down to lighting. And
Yeah, that's really cool. So one of the things you mentioned as far as getting started with backpacking and high elevations and how you really resonate kind of with that backpacking community, which I found really interesting because as a knife designer yourself and a gear junkie, most in the backpacking community, kind of like the REI crowd, they're not really into knives. So I find that interesting, and I'd like to hear your take on kind of that overlap there.
Yeah, you're super right. Good point. I would say the REI crowd, backpacking crowd, I ended up with many different camps, many different groups of people over the years, group meetups, just people you're sharing base camp next to just to make the summit the next day. And people love gear. They love to talk gear, they love to carry gear. And something like a knife is often it's looked upon as, what do you need that for? Or what are you going to do with that? So I remember my first real long backpacking. It seemed long. It's not long now, but at the time it did. I was doing many local hikes in the mountains there with friends. And one really long trip that stands out to me was a trip up to the highest point in LA was Mount Wilson. And that was about, maybe a little bit more than 15 miles for that one day, just up and down, and a little over 8,000 feet. And it was not as high as many hikes, not as long, but something about the terrain and the trail. It seemed longer than it was. And that was one of the first times I realized I didn't need the fixed blade that I had. I don't know what it was, but you think about everything you didn't need that you have with you when you do trips like that. And I remember having a Victorinox little classic.
Oh yeah.
It just had it's a great knife. It really is. And main blade, scissors, tweezers, toothpick, and I think a nail file. I've never felt my nails need to be filed well for a trip, but it served other purposes. And I remember using that for many trips. I used it up until it got taken away at an airport after it was okay to have those again. But
common story.
But when I moved up to like a little bit larger of a Swiss Army knife and then would have that around camp, it was kind of like, look at the knife guy. Easy, Rambo. So the backpacker community it's a different community. I miss those types of trips. And at the same time, I wouldn't like to go back to as ill-prepared as I was, or the group that I was with. Wouldn't like to go back to that time. So, having a real fixed blade with you, or something larger, is just, it doesn't really happen with that crowd. They're not very tool savvy. Well, they have a lot of gear.
That's so odd to me because the knife was like the first tool and it's essential for everything. I mean,
it sure is.
Let's say you break a strap on your backpack, you have cordage or something, you're going to have to cut it and, fix something there, or like a shoestring or a boot string or whatever. It's just so essential. I mean, I don't know that I've ever been on a camping trip starting at like age 7 where I did not have a knife with me. So it's just preposterous not to have one.
I agree. I do agree. And one more thing about the same backpacking community is that I feel that a lot of them do have some kind of emergency kit. Let's say whether it be store-bought, something maybe they put together themselves that is very small that they have on them that may have some very important essential things, and they keep it in their backpack. And to me, something that small and that important should not be kept in your backpack.
Yeah.
We get separated from our pack a lot during trips. It's something that should be on you, and especially a whistle. I've seen so many programs. I think we all have of casual backpackers, hikers that just get a little separated from their gear, or they have their gear with them, but they just do not have a way to call out for help that goes beyond the realm of their vocal cords. You can only yell and scream so long, so loud, compared to a whistle.
Yeah.
Where it's a bit of an unnatural sound. If you're doing it in groups of 3 and you're able to get people's attention, that is so overlooked. I think in classes and schools, in writings, in stories, the ability to signal for help is, to me, it's like at the bottom of the list. And I don't think it should be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, we're seeing a lot of the new backpacks where the chest strap that comes across will have a whistle built in, which I think is cool.
I've seen that. I do too. You're right. Company I do a lot of work with because I like their products and I've just been using their stuff for a while is the SOL company, Survive Outdoors Longer, and Adventure Medical Kits. Now they are under the same umbrella, Adventure Ready brands. Just recently, in the past year, from what I've noticed, tarps and space blankets that they would sell, the little cord lock, barrel lock is a whistle.
Oh, cool.
So that is just like an extra thing. But you're right. I have seen a lot of companies with the whistle built in. I don't use those types of backpacks, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be without a whistle.
Yeah. Reuben, you had mentioned earlier about really enjoying the higher altitude trips and excursions. So tell me a little bit about that and how you, when going to those higher altitudes, I'm guessing that's above 10,000 feet, what you do as far as to prepare, whether that's for altitude sickness or just getting acclimated to the thinner air and things like that.
Right. That is, that's a good question. And it's a little hard to explain how to get ready for high altitude. From what I understand, on all accounts, there's very little you can do to help that. If you have altitude sickness, I have a friend, good friend. We've done so much backpacking together, and he would get altitude sickness at about 5,000 feet, and we get up to 7,000 or 8,000 feet. He's already in headache mode, a little grumpy, very grumpy, and just starting to feel nauseous. And to me, if I'm sick in any way, it's so much harder to enjoy your trip outdoors. And I've heard people with little tricks and gimmicks for high altitude. It is one of those things that you can't really improve. I know you can make it worse with caffeine and alcohol. That will dehydrate you. Dehydration is going to give you a headache, and it's going to make everything's bad from that point. I have never heard of or come up with seen anybody use anything store-bought, any old remedy that helps you with high altitude. I believe you have it or you don't. And I have a friend, my first trip to Mount Whitney, which is a little under 15,000 feet, is it's considered the highest hiking trail in the U.S. People will argue, no, it's Denali. Denali is not a hiking trail. It's mountaineering, ropes, ladders, all kinds of bad endings to movies. No, you're not hiking anymore. So that being said, it has about a 30% success rate. It did in 2007 and 8 when I was doing it.
Wow.
And to be on a mountain like that with hundreds and hundreds of hikers, I'm not going to say thousands because they limit the amount that goes into that area a day. And to see all different styles of gear, of pack carry, I'll say that. And really physically, you do what you can. You do the miles you can. You do as much altitude as you can. It's important to train for high altitude hikes with high altitude hikes as close as you can get. You don't always have that luxury because Lone Pine in Southern California, which is kind of like I'm not going to say it's the base camp, but it is like the small desert city at the bottom of Mount Whitney, is at about 5,000 feet, maybe a little bit lower. And you have a lot of people coming over from Japan and Europe to hike the highest mountain in the U.S. They don't have that elevation there. They just don't, most places. So they are already at a disadvantage when they arrive. And acclimating in Lone Pine at 5,000 feet, that might be the highest they've ever been.
Wow.
So staying there for a couple of days, I'm a huge fan of acclimating. That being said, I have never had any effects of high altitude, whether it be Mount Whitney or Cusco, Peru, which
Amazing.
is a very, very high altitude. I feel at my best at that altitude, and I can't explain it.
That's incredible.
Growing up in high altitude in Big Bear and just making that like our main camping outdoors place, Big Bear, California, at Green Valley, which is just a little bit lower in elevation. I feel that has done something for me as far as expanding your lungs to really open them up and give you that capacity. And it's not something you can really duplicate. So my first time up in Mount Whitney was with a friend of mine, and we had done all the practice hikes together, all the high altitude hikes in the area we could together, and Grand Canyon up and down just to get ready for Mount Whitney. And another friend of ours did none of that. And he had no effects to the altitude. He didn't do a lot of training to get himself kind of a natural athlete, but he was practically skipping and laughing up there. And so was I. And he was our other friend who had done all the same hikes and training. It was about 8 months of just good hiking and training before doing the Grand Canyon, and about a full year of it altogether before doing Whitney. And he was feeling the effects very early. So there's so little you can really do.
Interesting.
It's one of those things. And last time I was at a really high elevation, I believe it was 2017, when I was in Cusco, Peru, before doing Machu Picchu. And I didn't feel anything. We did a lot of walking and hiking up to the city is beautiful, and it's kind of like there's the surrounding mountains even higher than the city. I believe it's somewhere around 16,000. Don't quote me on that. I get things confused sometimes. But the hotels, like in a lot of hotels you check in, there was that bottle of water that you can have, complimentary or not.
Yeah.
In Cusco, the hotels have this air canister with a little mask, so you can
for oxygen.
Use that.
Yeah,
for oxygen, right? And it's interesting to see that. But altitude is no joke. I have seen people with edema on the trail, and at 15,
oh wow,
15, a little under 15,000 feet, you don't really get the kind of pulmonary edema and cerebral edema like you would in the Himalayas and higher.
Sure.
But you do get the start of it. And when I say the start of it, I think you may have seen clips of people's eyes kind of bulging out from the
pressure,
the edema in the head, right? Cerebral edema. And the start of that is a very bad headache, pressure building up. So you see a lot of that in Mount Whitney and even places lower than that. It starts off with a headache. You're irritated. You irritate people around you. You get a stomach ache. Everything seems to be hitting them at one time. And they become kind of a liability to be on the trail. And it has nothing to do with their legs, their physical fit. And this is something extra that you can't really plan for. And when you think you've done all you can, you get surprised because around 13,000 feet, people, There's actually a stop and a sign that says 13,000 feet, but it seems like something magical happens between 13,000 feet and 14,500, where you either take a serious turn, not in a good way,
Yeah.
or you keep muscling on. And it's just, it's something I recommend any serious climber to do, is try some high altitude backpacking, and that will force you to fine tune your gear needs, and you'll think of everything you didn't need. At 13,000 feet, I saw this girl who was probably about maybe not even 5 feet tall. She had a pack on her at 13,000 feet that was about 40 pounds. Now, it's customary to leave your gear at the 12,000 foot camp and take what you need for the summit and come back down to the camp. It's not a dangerous thing to do because there are hundreds of people on the trail. You would never really have a chance to lay there hurt for more than 5 minutes. There's just so many people on the trail willing to help. So you take what you need, the essentials, and you go to the peak and you come back down to your camp. She, like many people, packed her fears, and you get a backpack and people fill it with things that they're afraid of. They will have everything that they're afraid of with them for even a short distance. And that kind of hiking is dangerous because, well, you're expecting someone else to have to carry you and your gear weight if you have a bad episode or you fall down or you hurt yourself. So putting that on somebody is not a good idea.
Gotcha. That's a good overview about it. Personally, the highest altitude I think I've been is usually when skiing. So, and that's usually 13,000 feet, maybe 13,500 is probably the highest.
That's pretty high.
Yeah. I mean, it's up there. And so I typically notice like the first day, like usually getting into the slopes or whatever in the evening and, getting acclimated to the condo wherever we're staying. And I'll just start to get a headache and kind of that pressure. You just feel a little off. And one of the things that I found that really helps is usually taking a Motrin, like a couple Motrins that first day, and then just drinking a lot of water, just a shit ton of water. And that has helped. And then usually like some supplements. And are you familiar with the company Wilderness Athlete?
I am not.
So they make supplements specifically. I think they were designed for hunters and getting them acclimated for high backcountry hunts. So they have a supplement specifically for altitude to get you acclimated. You're supposed to start taking it like a few weeks before, or maybe it's a week before you're going to be at that altitude. And so I did that over the summer when we went on a backpacking trip in Montana. We were about 10,500 feet. And I think that definitely helped. Definitely seemed like it. The other thing that I've noticed that seems to help is like taking a lot of electrolytes, drinking a lot of water. And so I'm a big fan of Element, LMT. It's like salt and electrolytes and magnesium. And that seems to help.
Yeah. Hydration is always going to be pinnacle in any kind of adventure or trip. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Reuben, so doing all of these outdoor adventures and traveling so much, nature and the outdoors and the wilderness is really important to you. Did that come from a very early age, or is that something that has kind of grown and evolved over the years?
Early age, definitely. My first memories are camping with the family. My grandfather, mainly 4 years old. My first memory is like when the lights first went on and you started rolling tape, as far as I can remember. People are wondering what tape is. But anyway, was in a snowy campground in the desert with frozen tomatoes on the table and lots of snow. And just the idea of camping and saying it around the house as a kid was like, yes, yay, cool. I had this wooden thing that was knife shaped. It was the oddest, like wooden paddle. But to me, that was like my knife that I would tuck in the belt because I was like 4, 5, and 6. I think by the time I was 7, I finally had like a decent pocket knife. I think it was a Remington brand pocket knife that I remember saying USA on it, and it was carbon steel on the blade.
Oh, cool.
I could be making that up, but I remember that up until several years ago. That was kind of rare to see that.
Yeah.
I don't see many carbon steel pocket knives these days.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Now, you mentioned getting really involved with some of the different outdoor forums. Are you still involved with any of those? And what are some of your favorites?
Well, I have not been on a forum for a very long time. But from about 2001 to about going to say 2018, I was on them like religiously, and I would do lots of trips, and I would post a lot of photos and write out a lot of different things. And it was well received for a long time. And some forums would kind of just talk to you on the side and ask if you could do a trip report every week on. And at the time, I was doing so many practice training hikes for San Jacinto and Mount Gorgonio and Bertha Peak and Big Bear and Mammoth Lakes, Grand Canyon, and Mount Whitney, which we did 2 years in a row. But all the practice hikes to me were always harder, actually, than the actual big climb itself.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hard to explain, but they were. So I had a chance to post a lot of backpacking trips and not a whole lot of survival stuff, believe it or not, or knife stuff, because I was not such a big part of that community until about, I'm going to say more 2002, 2003. Was always a bit of a knife collector, knife guy, but they weren't always the kind that you would take on a trip like I was doing. So being on those forums was great because it was one of the only ways to get information at the time. YouTube, I don't even think was around at that time, and it wasn't not in my arsenal at the time.
Yeah.
So we just had forums, what other people were posting, and it was a time for people to kind of get together, ask each other questions about places, trailheads, trail conditions, rules, gear. What did you take for that? How much does that weigh? Things like this. They were backpacking forums and outdoor adventure forums. Blade Forums was one of them, and they always had like an adventure travel subforum, which I spent a lot of time on for trips. And Randall's Adventure and Training had the Jungle Training Forum, which they also had an area on backpacking and trips like that. So I always was, I seem to frequent those more than others. It was a good chance to learn about gear and to get ridiculed for doing it wrong from somebody who's been on there longer than you and knows better. And
of course,
it's part of it. And I learned a lot from I honestly can take everything back to professionally. Those forums really ultimately gave me a platform to practice the layouts for magazines, what I didn't even know I was doing. And, my friend Jeff Randall, he was able to see that I was doing kind of the things that he and a lot of other writers were doing, only I was doing it on a smaller scale on a forum. And I remember him being one of the first people to tell me, I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but a lot of the writers for the magazines that are out there or that he was around are just kind of phoning it in from the couch and from the backyard and not really doing any trips or adventure. And that's what would make my, I guess, contributions a little more unique, is that I'm actively doing things. And that's something to this day, I think has helped me get on to other things. But again, the forums give you a chance to write, to practice, to see what your photos look like on something larger than your camera, and it was a good place to get information. I did just several hundreds, maybe thousands of posts over the years, and people would come up to me at shows when I first started going to them and introduce themselves by like their screen name, and I'm Turtleneck 557. Like, who? I'm Reuben. Nice to meet you. What's your real name? So that was kind of interesting for people to just know my forum posts and pictures and things like that. I got to the point, Seth, where the amount of work I felt I was really putting into forum posts, trip reports, and trip reviews was exceeding what the, I would say, takeaway was from it. And that was 1 to 20 people posting back cool pics. Nice job.
Not a lot of feedback.
So I thought, well, it just seemed to taper off after a while. And I was just it was expected, like, oh, there's a trip guide with all these stuff. I just kind of stopped. I stopped, and I was already writing for magazines at the time, and I'd rather put the time and energy into something that's going to, I guess, just be on a different scale. And once I got on Instagram, thanks to Shane Adams, he had pushed me for probably a good 2 years before I got on to get on, that it would be better suited for somebody like myself. I finally did, and it has been. I don't feel I have to post 10 to 30 pictures per post. I can, you can do whatever you want.
Sure.
Post just a couple and the ones that really matter instead of just 10 photos. Something about photography that I like about Instagram is it makes you fine tune what you're going to choose.
Yeah. Got to be more specific.
Yeah. Right. I got a good photo tip years ago about travel photography and photography in general. What the difference between an amateur and a professional. Amateur will show you 60 photos, maybe even 20 photos of a thing, a place, a situation. And a professional will show you maybe 2 or 3 that'll just blow you away. So something to be said about showing your best work.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
So a couple things there. I actually have another question about the altitude. And so you mentioned from an early age hitting that altitude. And I'm very curious if starting from such an early age and doing that, if that helped you acclimate and so build up your lung capacity and everything else, as opposed to someone who starts much later, they would not have that, like myself.
Sure.
And if that's the case, then that's a great excuse to get your kids out at a very early age, camping and hiking.
True. And if not even camping and hiking to start with, snow, sledding. A lot of people from Southern California will go up into higher elevation when it snows so they can take their kids sledding. They can't help but notice there's a difference in the amount of air up there. Picnics, there are a lot of day things you can do around Big Bear Lake and Green Valley Lake, Arrow Bear. These are all places in Southern California where there is just so much to do in the wilderness to get kids started and to get families kind of away. Although I don't think you can ever really get away and disconnect so much these days. I do believe, Seth, that has helped me tremendously because I have never had altitude issues, sickness. And there's a reason why certain times of the year, you will find a lot of professional fighters up there doing road work. Because they go up there to train for that altitude. So when they go to Nevada to fight or any other place, most likely they won't be that high unless you're in Colorado. You won't be that high. So that really does something for you.
They're not sucking wind like their opponents.
Right. And as kids, we were just actively hiking and running. And that has to do, I do believe that has something to do with your lung capacity over the years, and consistently going there has something to do with that. And I do believe that it is something that has helped and still does help. But I have not been in that type of high altitude for a very long time. So anytime I'm any place where it looks like there's a little bit of an incline to hill, I just gun it a little more, a little harder because I miss it. Yeah. And I do feel the feeling people get from bungee jumping and skydiving is the feeling I get when I'm very high on a mountain and I'm going fast. And I tell people I'm going to be rude. I'm going to go ahead. I just like to take it a lot harder. And it really, you do that, it just really expands everything in your heart.
You're hitting a flow state, I think.
Sorry?
You're probably hitting a flow state.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'd rather do that on my own, certain parts, certain sections.
Yeah.
Like, this is where I leave you. I'll see you on the other stretch on the downhill. And then the downhill, I'm dragging. I'm the last guy in the back, like Mopey. I'm always the last guy in the back. I just am downhill. I hate it. It bothers me. It's terrible on your knees.
So bad.
I used to use trekking poles, and I thought I like them for crossing creeks for safety reasons. You kind of feel like a spider with less legs, but more to grab onto, more to grip onto. But I'm a camera guy, so it was a hassle always messing with the camera. And I thought I'm going to do myself a lot better if I if I can just strengthen my legs more. And I always had relatively strong legs that rarely ever get sore, or blisters. Blisters are something I have not had in several years. I just don't get them. My feet are very coarse,
Yeah.
kind of hard, but I prefer it that way. In the Southwest, I often would hike in deerskin moccasins, not
Whoa.
with a little shoe bottom, but just flat deerskin. And that's kind of a weird place to do it, but you can get away with it because it's dry.
Yeah.
It's dry, but there are a lot of rocks and things, and you kind of get used to
Sure.
that. You kind of get used to it. I like it. In one of the books I really enjoy, Horace Kephart's book, he talks about moccasins being the only kind of footwear you can dump your canoe and still be able to swim as if you're barefoot. You can walk on logs like you're a cat. Your feet will definitely kind of, we just did a lot of log crossings and things like that. So I really enjoyed them. I even went to Alaska and did some pretty, I would say, cool hikes and climbs with them. While everybody else thought I was a nut for having just deerskin moccasins, because the amount of snow and the amount of slush and the amount of mud, at some point it was like, being on a slip and slide. That's how I preferred to travel a lot. And about altitude, here's something really interesting that I don't think many people, I've never heard, read, or I've never had a discussion with anybody in the backpacking community. And it was, again, Jeff Randall who brought this to my attention. And I think this is something that should be published or written because it is a fact. When you are in the rainforest, like in Peru, we're basically on the equator. We're not too far south from the equator. You are at sea level in such a humid environment. The point he made, which was a good one, was that the way it feels walking around in that jungle environment, rainforest, I have to correct myself and say rainforest. It is a true rainforest. It is about the same feeling as you would get at 5,000 foot elevation. And that is true. I recognize that right away. We're walking around. It was 2007 or 2008, one of the first two times I was down there. And that was very obvious. I felt this doesn't feel like sea level. It's a little harder to breathe. You can definitely feel the moisture. It felt like I was at 8,000 or maybe even higher than that. I don't really feel altitude in that way. I never have. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
It is strange, but that's something I can identify with. Walking around at that humidity in the rainforest feels like you are at elevation.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So outside of the moccasins, what are your normal boots or shoes that you typically wear for most of your excursions?
Good question. I'm not a boot guy. I've had to wear boots, Panama sole type boots, Ultimas for South America. They are designed to keep your feet dry because every step you take, you're squishing water out, and they do a good job. Besides that, I've had one pair of A Solo boots.
Oh, I still have a pair of those that I've had for 20 years. I have resold 3 times.
Did you? I should have done that. I got mine in 2001 in Mammoth Lakes, California. And that was actually the first pair of boots I took to the Amazon jungle when they said not to take Gore-Tex. So being from a place called Show Me, Prove It to Me, I took them. And I think up until recently, my foot was on the website for, this is what it looks like when you take the wrong footwear. And it was immersion foot, trench foot. You've heard about it, and it's one of those things that creeps up on you. Having Gore-Tex, they do a great job of keeping water out and keeping water in at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm a trail runner guy. The more mesh and the less material, the better, because ultimately when your feet do get wet easily through something like that, they actually dry faster too. They do, and they're lighter. And a couple of really inspirational books for me was Ultralight Backpacking. I think that was the name of it. Another one was Beyond Lightweight Backpacking with Ray Jardine, or or is that the guy from the Beach Boys? Same name. And he went into footwear and how, I forget what it is mathematically, but something about taking a certain amount of pounds off your feet takes that many pounds off your back and your shoulders and your body throughout this amount of time. Those were through hikers that wrote these books. So when I started using just very, very low Adidas, I started with Reebok, and then New Balance. Didn't like the way they wore. I would go through 2 pairs of running shoes a year. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of hiking.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of hiking, but I finally settled on Adidas type of trail runners that I really enjoy. And they're very light. I try to replace them with the same model, if not something similar. When other people around me are wearing full-on boots or even boots up to their knees in snake country and things like that, which I always found ridiculous because snake is a smarter animal than people give him credit for. If they have a high boot, they're just going to strike a little bit higher to where the heat is, but that's okay. I've always been big on hiking. So if you give yourself a pair of moccasins or trail runners and you go on the trail for X amount of years, your ankles, your feet will figure out what their job is. They will conform to it. And they do. I've had several situations where the person behind me just went, "Oh man, I just saw your ankle, your foot, the way it rolled. Wow, that looked like painful." Yeah, like I definitely felt it give or something on the rock, but I have strong ankles, and it's not from carrying a lot of weight. It's just from miles. And doing it. And the more you put yourself in an uneven terrain type of situation, the more flex, the more your ankles, your feet, and your legs are all going to figure out what their job is. If you were to look at the many people that have a broken ankle or leg, have serious falls, get taken out of a canyon, by helicopter or whatever their mishap is hiking, almost all of them have big old heavy boots. You can't correct your step so quickly. When you have a moccasin or a trail runner, a bad step, you can feel it. You can feel it. You can feel the ground moving, the rock moving. You can feel the displacement of weight, and you have a better chance to correct it than a clunky, heavy boot. You're almost like you have to go with it. Like, your reaction time is slower. It gets caught in things more. I'm not doing anything for people who like boots right now, but believe me, it's a fact. I've hiked with several people over the years that have had types of injuries that I don't think they would have had if they had just prepared themselves by letting their feet naturally develop. And so I'm a lightweight footwear guy. However, now I'm in the Northeast and there's snow. There's snow right now. It's snowing right now outside. There's snowing. And there's going to be snow this weekend. And when I got here, one of the first things I got was a good case of frostbite.
Well, there's that.
Wearing trail runners, like I was just advocating for.
Oops.
And the deal with that is I was still living in California, from California. And Patrick is the lead instructor for the Randall's Adventure and Training School. And we were flown to Louisiana to do a class for an elite group of people in our country. And we were in Louisiana. It was December. Remember, this coldest it gets is about 50, maybe a little bit of frost. So I took my moccasins and my trail runners. Part of that trip was after we were done with our training, I was getting flown to visit my brother in New Jersey, New York area, where I am now. And I don't take a lot of shoes. I don't know how many pairs of shoes you travel with, but I just had 2. And when I actually got to New York, they had a considerable amount of snow falling down. And I was going to be totally fine with that if it wasn't for my good friend Jay. And I had known him on the forums for years, and he loves snow, cold, rain. He doesn't like people, bugs, or snakes. So winter camping is perfect for him. And I've been in snow several times in trail runners and moccasins. It never bothered me. It wasn't snow quite like this or for that long. So when he said, hey, I'm going to come by and get you at 7 in the morning, we're going to be out in the snow, I just, okay. I have two choices here. I'll go with this. And it was something like over 36 hours of just being in snow on really, really, and it was probably 20 or a little bit below 20. And that trip alone wasn't terrible. I remember the feet were cold, putting my feet near the fire and just kind of rubbing them with your hand. That's very important to use your hands because you can feel more than numb feet. So one of the most dangerous things you can do is try to rewarm your limbs, your fingers, your legs, your feet around fire, unless you have some other indicator of what the true temperature is. And if everything is cold, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
I was just massaging my feet a lot, trying to get circulation going and getting them by the fire. I had some kind of woolish socks, which I never wear, but I did for this trip. I only wear very thin polyester dress socks. And that is something that is the best tip I ever got from the backpacking community is the thicker your socks are, that's not going to give you as much insulation and comfort. Leave that up to your shoe and your pad, your cushion in there. However, the thicker your sock, it's going to absorb more moisture. It's that moisture that's going to give you the blister. Having a very thin sock liner or dress sock dries out so fast, it can't give you the blister that you would normally get.
Never thought about that.
That's been something I've had with me since 2005. And this is the funniest thing, but I just hand washed a pair of dress socks I started using in 2007. It was the George brand from Walmart dress sock.
Whoa.
Polyester. There is not one hole or anything wrong with that. I had two pair.
Oh my gosh.
Still going strong. And they have kind of a greenish, blackish stain in certain areas because I broke in my jungle boots with those. And the way they said to break them in was to get them completely immersed in a creek or a bucket and walk them dry. When you walk them dry, then they're conformed. And that peeling, that color transfer is on those socks. So they always look kind of dirty and grungy, even though they're not. And to me, I attribute that as one of the reasons I don't get blisters from hiking like people would. I can not hike I've never gone a month without hiking, but I can not hike for 2 or 3 months and not get a blister because I'm not using cotton and I'm not using thick socks and my feet sweat a lot. So having thin socks, super important. Now combine that with your breathability of a mesh trail runner. Now that's kind of further the drying, it's furthering it. So for me, I'm in a good place with that combo, despite what people want to wear, whatever works for them or makes them feel comfortable. I'm okay with. I don't fear bad steps on the trail. It could happen, but I don't think that is going to take my ankle out. Maybe in my old age, it will. But
it's so interesting to hear all the different opinions when it comes to the gear such as this, whether that's socks or boots.
I break all the rules.
Yeah.
I'm like the anti-gear person. And people who hike with me have been around me in a camp. They're just, the jokes and the comments never stop because I literally have a very small backpack that is bright blue and looks like a shopping bag. I think we're getting ready for the SHOT Show. And Patrick messaged me something like, "Do you have your grocery bag full of all the all the gear you're going to need ready and packed for the week?"
Nice.
Something like that.
Reuben, so out of all these adventures and experiences, what's the biggest life lesson that you've learned from nature and the outdoors and just spending so much time in the wilderness and the jungles?
Well, wow, life lessons. Wow. Who says I learned anything?
I would hope there's a couple of lessons tucked away in there someplace.
I think there is just a handful of things can get you by and get you through. And combining or comparing overseas trips to Southeast Asia and South America and the Middle East, combining that with local trips in the States, backpacking, they really are two different types of trips. But that being said, a couple of things that stand out are your social skills being your strongest, your most important survival skill, no matter where you are, and in so many ways. And I did a podcast with Shane and Patrick at the SHOT Show, and that's one of the things that we went into after we had graduated at Jungle School with Randall's Adventure and Training. Was, I remember Jeff and Mike stressing the point that you have a handful of skills now that are good for this type of thing, but your social skills are going to be more important throughout life. And that really hit home, which works on the trail, works off the trail. When you meet somebody, you meet locals that maybe you shouldn't be there. They're not expecting to see you. It works in airports where there is a language barrier. It works when you accidentally stumble into somebody's property in a jungle environment and you don't know how to properly explain yourself. Wave, smile, things like that go a long way. That was a huge lesson because it could be applied to making the wrong turn and ended up in the wrong part of town and having to just not be a threat and just trying to
talk your way out of it.
Yeah. Verbal judo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Things like that. When traveling, I've gone to several places where kidnapping Americans and Canadians and Europeans is a big thing. It is a known thing. It is even a way of life for them.
Yeah,
to go that far several times, and there's been a lot of close calls, and social skills will help you out in that way more than any pocket full of tools or bag full of tools. So that's one. I guess I don't know if it answers your question, but that is one thing that has been. You can apply it to other things. Skills as far as wilderness skills and outdoor skills, you'll find there's a handful that will translate over to all different places, types of terrain, but social skills across the board, being able to communicate with people, work with their customs, things like that. Yeah,
that makes sense. And that reminds me of when I traveled to Europe in college. I studied for a semester in Europe. And one of the things going into that experience, just some of the pre-semester training was don't be the ugly American, when you're traveling. Don't just expect everyone to speak English and to know our customs and things like that, but try to learn a little bit about the culture and customs that each country has and learn a few basic phrases just so you can get around and just not expect everyone to cater to us. And so I've taken that whenever I travel and try to understand that and just to fit in and not stand out.
And you really nailed it on a lot of different points there. There's nothing worse than saying, but I'm American. And the one thing I see a lot in Mexico, I guess, because Mexico and the U.S. we're so close. We're so close in every way. A lot of Americans vacation there, maybe have family there. A lot of Mexicans live or have family in the U.S. and it's almost like we're really just kind of living together, especially if you're anywhere in the Southwest.
Sure.
So this is why I think people use this phrase. I've seen it a lot in Mexico. Do you take U.S. dollars? And the answer is often yes, they do. But there are some places where they don't want to. They like to use their currency. They actually like U.S. dollars because they could tell you a higher price or something.
Yeah.
But just that statement alone flags you, lets everybody around them and yourself know. And I'm far from a paranoid traveler, but I spent a lot of time in parts of Mexico that are not touristy in 2009 when American journalists were turning up with their heads and hands cut off because they thought they were spies. And cartel was really a big thing then. And a phrase like that could have gotten me in a lot of trouble. So something like that may seem harmless and okay in a touristy area until you get back in your taxi shuttle and go a little further down the road, and then somebody pulls it over like, hey, give us the Americans. So something like you said about blending in and not flagging yourself.
Yeah.
That is super important. I've written several articles on safety travel and dangers of travel. And I really like and hate writing those at the same time. My point is not to make people paranoid of travel, but aware of the little things that could really be good or bad for you. And yes, like you said, just attempting to learn a few phrases, that shows respect.
Yeah.
That shows respect. And even if they're going to laugh at you and just start speaking to you in English, which always seems to happen,
Indeed.
like, oh, all that studying the phrases for nothing. It disarms them, first of all.
Yes.
And you're not a threat. You're not just trying to only speak English and expect that. I've had people in Thailand laugh at me and not really laugh at me, but just kind of laugh and then apologize for their English being so bad. I'm like, I'm in Thailand. This is your country. This is your language. I'm the one who should be apologizing. Yeah. But like you said, the ugly American, well, that is on so many levels, because there is this feeling like, because you have the passport, because you're from here, things don't apply to you. That is, you really need to shed that thinking. People do. I had several situations floating in my head from interrogations in Singapore and, oh, wow, being stuck in other countries where that wouldn't help me one bit. If anything, it might get you an extra lash or something like that. So play ball. You're in somebody else's, country. You are at the mercy of their law and their ways. And there are a lot of ways to offend people that you don't mean to offend. And that could be something as simple and casual as eating food in certain countries, the way you put your chopsticks down or the way you put them in the food. That could be very, very offensive to people around you. If you're in Japan, you don't put chopsticks straight down in the food, sticking out in between bites. You don't stick them in. There's a certain way to do things, just not turn heads. And blending in is good because for so many reasons, first of all. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you don't always, just by your face, what you're wearing or something. I've spent a lot of time in Italy, Greece, and some in Egypt, where those three places I can generally pass. And I don't get looked at so much like maybe somebody next to me who's maybe taller and lighter skin or darker skinned, or just wearing, something that is overly touristy. So that is good. Also, I've been in parts of the Philippines where kidnapping was a regular thing by a certain group. And I was visiting the area with another writer, photographer, outdoorsman. We were both instructing classes around this adventure and training in Southern California. And we did a trip to the Philippines. He met me there to a place that was very, very dangerous for everyone, Filipinos or anybody who was a tourist in the area. But for some reason, they, with Americans and, being the state that it's in, they tried not to negotiate with the government because they won't pay generally. So they try to get your phone and go through a list and call your family and your friends up. And I've had to tell like people in the past that if you do get a call and they're saying I'm kidnapped or whatever, don't do anything. Leave me there. My choice. Stuff like that. Don't give them anything. But different type of travel, definitely, than backpacking trip. He was my friend. Reza is his name. Pakistani and Mexican, and so we were both there, and we're working on our cover, growing the beard out, and hats, and glasses, and we get there, and my friend there, just says, "Hey, you guys want to take a walk around the barrio? You see the neighborhood?" Yeah. So gets his gun out, puts it in the back. We start walking out, and we tell them, "Okay, we went over this, but just so you know, we're traveling Egyptian tourists. That's it. Nothing else." Okay, we'll stick to that story. We walk maybe half a block, and he's yelling at his friends, "Hey, come see my friends, my American friends from California. Come see my." He's bringing the whole neighborhood out.
Oh, geez. And
that's the kind of place that is a very similar place where the Abu Sayyaf would come in, with 50, 60 guys and take you on a boat, and you'd be there for anywhere from a year on. There are people. There are programs about it. There are 3 episodes of Locked Up Abroad or I Shouldn't Be Alive, based on that part of the country where they had several Americans Australians, South Africans, Europeans in general, kidnapped. They're hostages and waiting. And it's tricky because the way their government and their police handle situations like that is, and this is how they do it. We think they're over there someplace. They get close enough and just light up the whole area and hope, only the good guys get hurt. So you can flag yourself in a very bad way by being over American in some parts of the world. Blending in is good. That situation and that trip with people in that area was one of the best situations that I ever encountered, because it was not anything like what I thought could happen or the worst case scenario. They were some of the nicest, warmest people with some of the best food. I was in an area that was just really kind of local, and everybody was just really aware of people's guests and not trying to be informants and make some money on the side and say there are Americans over here. So it was a great trip. It turned out really, really well. It was a good trip. We didn't get kidnapped.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of trips and experiences, Reuben, I'd love to hear what adventurous experience would you never want to repeat and why? And, or is your absolute favorite trip that you've been on? So
wow,
maybe it could be one of the same. Who knows?
You're right. I was thinking that might be the same trip. And going back again, I'd have to say that would be Mount Whitney in California. It was, I did it 2 years in a row, exactly like to the date, just about. And the second time I did that, I was fresh back from the jungle. So I had spent all this time at sea level, and I didn't know what that was going to do. To me, that was going to be a real test to go from sea level to now I'm going straight to, it was like getting picked up from the airport, go switch out packs. Mind you, I'm still very full of bites and stings and things like that. It's just a natural thing. If you spend a lot of time outdoors, it's going to happen. So that I need to change out gear. And that very night we headed straight to Lone Pine when I got back from the jungle. So some people like a few days in between or something. And time was not a luxury, because when you enter the lottery for Mount Whitney, you only have a few days to play with. And that was arranged before the South American trip, and just tried to make it work. So getting off a plane after being at sea level in the jungle, going to camp at 8,889 feet as your portal camp before making the summit the next day, or going to the 12,000 foot camp the next day. That was the plan. That's what was happening. And it was okay. The next day, my buddy decided, hey, this is our second time doing it. Let's not stop at the 12,000 foot camp and acclimate, and then the next day make the summit. Let's make the summit today.
Oh.
The first full day we woke up there, and then come down to our camp, and then the next day just break camp and go down to Lone Pine. So we did that, and it was challenging. And I remember being finished with it, and we're in the hotel in Lone Pine. We're about to go eat, and we took our shower. You get this feeling of like this great accomplishment, like you did something great when you do a climb like that. And you have. It is not for everyone. And I remember my friend saying, aren't you so happy? Like, aren't you glad we did that? Like, in one day we just did the summit and then came back down. And my answer was no, I wasn't. I feel like we saw some of the scenery that I really liked, really remembered. Like, we passed it in the dark. A lot more terrible things could have happened in the dark. We were the only fools making the summit at night. We didn't get to the top till about 10:30.
Oh, wow.
We didn't get back down to the 12,000 foot camp till about midnight.
Wow.
So there goes pictures for that trip of the summit, but we still, more coming back from the summit. And it was really taxing on him, and he didn't enjoy himself, and was more of a prick than usual. If he's listening to this, he knows who he is. And if he doesn't, I'll let him know. That was you. There's only two of us up there. So I remember not enjoying it that much the second time. And not wishing I hadn't done it, but just not wanting to do it again, because it's almost like if you've ever gone to a place so amazing that you really enjoy and the thought sits with you and you may never go back there again. To me, that is like, it is a shelved, amazing experience. And the other side of that is having a place like that you enjoyed, that you felt was amazing scenically, for your friendship there on the trail, off the trail, and a goal, something that you were able to do. And then now you go back a second time. Well, it's like part 2 of a great movie. It's almost never as good, and you're trying to recapture that. So I wouldn't want that experience to diminish anymore. Sometimes I get into my head like, maybe I'll do it when I'm this age. Maybe I'll do it just to prove I still got it. But I don't feel I have to, and I just like that memory the way it was. I want to remember it the way it was. And there were good points to doing it faster the second time, but it was both an amazing, great experience and something I just wouldn't want to repeat just for that. I wouldn't want to diminish it and be like, oh, the third time was even worse. Hey, maybe next year, the fourth time will be even worse. Maybe somebody will fall. I don't know. So I'd like to just keep that how I remember it in my head more so than trying to recapture it.
Yeah, super. No, that's great. Now, Reuben, I know you're something of a minimalist. So that being said, I'd love to hear what gear you consider essential on every trip that you go on.
Pants. There you go. Shoes. Well, okay. So my regular gear loadout is below 4 pounds. I'm somewhere between 3.5 pounds to 3 pounds and 15 ounces.
That's so little.
It is. But I'm always comfortable, warm, dry, and hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
Everything besides that is extra. And especially if I'm just doing it one night. I mean, I don't think like, oh, well, if it's only one night, I can suffer for one night. I don't suffer. I not on backpacking trips. When I get to take gear, I'm usually the most organized because I have the least amount. Here's a funny story. Last week or a week and a half ago, before the SHOT Show happened, 2022 SHOT Show, I was camping with my friend, and he's a guy who likes to take 80 pounds on a sled, and and I had just a small backpack, and I was really bummed that in my rearranging of packs, transferring stuff, left one Ziploc bag out that had a flashlight that I use as my only main light, headlamp, and a little life straw to just drink out of whatever and not have to worry about it. And I think like a little packet of tissue. I have like one Ziploc bag with like those 3 things. Yeah. And somehow it ended up not going on the trip. And he kept making a joke about, you need to start making a gear checklist for all your 4 things that you take. Because, when I forget one thing, it's like, that's a big part of the gear, the kit setup. My kit is super simple. My loadout is almost the same every time. It has been. I don't own. People often ask me what kind of sleeping bag and what kind of tent do you use? Mm-hmm. Well, that's an easy answer. I don't own a sleeping bag or a tent. I haven't in several years. I've obviously been a tarp camper for a long time. Or if I'm in a place where I just know the weather well, I don't even bother setting up a tarp if I know it's just not going to. But that doesn't mean I don't have a tarp I can reach down and grab and throw over me like a blanket. So that being said, very simple. I use a platypus 2-liter container without the hydration straw and all that, because that just gets frozen and useless in the winter.
Yeah,
it's another thing to carry. And although I like the straw and the idea that you can just sip from it, I don't like the fact that you can't just like take a big drink and gulp from it. Yeah. I like that. Sometimes that's necessary. So my hydration, my water carry is just that platypus 2-liter. And then I have another one that is cut in half. That is just my scooping bowl. Sometimes our water sources, will be like this deep and, 2-3 inches. There's good clean water or water you can disinfect, but it is hard to scoop. How are you going to scoop it when you need flow and gravity and a certain angle? So having that second platypus cut in half gives me a bowl. It gives me a bowl to eat out of if I wanted to. It gives me a way to scoop up water. So that's my hydration. I only use torso pads underneath me for insulation. That's a Gazmer Gear. Gazmer Gear is a big company that I deal with. I've been a trail ambassador with them for several years. And I use one of their packs that I've modified to be even lighter. So there's pack, hydration. My torso pad is just I want to say it's about 4 ounces. It's a night light. I think they call it night light, like an egg crate, folds up. I've had that in all conditions. I use it all the time because I'm usually smart enough to get some kind of debris and put it under my legs, boughs from a down tree, big panels of birch bark. There's a lot of things you can put under you that are going to be, big on your insulation values as opposed to carrying a full length. Sleeping bag, I don't have one. People in the backpacking community are familiar with quilts. They call them backpackers quilts. It's basically like if you had a sleeping bag, for people that don't know, let's say you only zipped it up to your calf and now you turned it sideways. So it's like a triangle and there's no zipper. So it's open on the bottom. It's not mummy. It just goes up to my neck. I started making those for thru hikers and for myself in 2006. Sold some, kept 2. It weighs 10 ounces for a 40-degree rating.
Wow.
So I have a snap in the back, a little front, like a shock cord on a little barrel lock to adjust it. But I almost never use that. It has to be 20 degrees for me to use that to really cinch it up. So that is used with either a mountain laurel bivy, which is about 7 or 8 ounces. And recently I'm using the SOL Escape Bivy, the Pro, which is about 6.5 ounces. It's a little smaller and conforming, but that's good for trapping body heat. Mm-hmm. So that quilt that I make with that bivy on a nightlight torso pad and a small 5x7 or 5x8 integral design tarp is what I've been using until the past year. I started using the T60, which is a cold cracker bushcraft product. It's about the same size, only it's xenon material. Still nylon, so it doesn't stretch as much. It has 2 tie outs. I have it in a really bright orange. They have a lot of other colors, but I look at a shelter as something that could actively be signaling at the same time for you if you need it to be. So that for the last year has been my go-to tarp. I use it. I've used it several times. It has 2 tie outs already there. So all you're doing is tying a shoelace around 2 trees and staking down the 2 ends. So that is my shelter, backpack, water right there. What do I boil in? I'm old school backpacker, Foster's beer can with a top. The top is removed with the safety can opener. The safety can opener removes the top of the I call it the pot, the kettle, and there's no sharp edges, and you just bend that little finger tab up, so now you have a little handle. That is a little more stout than your average soda can, beer can. Sure. It's wider, it's shorter, and it holds a lot of volume. I want to say 750 mil, maybe more. And I just put a little a wire hanger bail on that. That weighs about I'm going to say 1/4 ounce. Okay, so and I've had the same one for 6 years, all through Alaska, all through Norway, crazy. All through the jungle, and I have kept that with me for so many years. It looks brown and black and gold, all kinds of stains on it. It's got just soot on it, a little doo-doo on there. It's just got a little bit of everything. It's just like so. And I use that. I've used the same one for several years. It wasn't until just last camp trip I went to dry it near the fire, and we had been burning oak for about 7 hours, and I just didn't watch it enough, and it was empty, so it just kind of burned a hole in it. So now I'm on the second one, which is the second one I've used in 6 years. So that is and I usually only boil water in there. Or we'll make spruce tea, hemlock tea, pine tea.
Yeah.
And so that's my boiling apparatus. That's my metal container. What do I drink out of? It's a Van de Kamp. I feel like they were some little sausages at one time.
Mhm.
It's very short. It's probably about 3 inches high, nice and round. And I cord wrapped it with jute twine,
Hmm.
like whipping, like you would apply whipping to the end of a rope or a sheath or something like that. And that allows me to hold it when it's hot. So that takes care of just about all of that right there. I always have a fleece with me in the pack, which is usually, if it's not Mountain Hardwear, it's a certain type of REI fleece that is 7 ounces. It's a 7-ounce fleece for like a large size or a medium size. And I've had that with me for several years. So that takes care of that. I used to carry an extra pair of socks. I don't. Now I always have one pair of leather gloves, because I think leather gloves in many situations can take the place of a saw or an axe when it comes to procuring wood and processing it. If you can grab it and get it between two trees and break it,
Okay, yeah.
you're ahead of the game. It protects your hands. You can pick up hot things. You can drag a lot of wood, break it apart very quickly with leather gloves. Once your hands or your feet go wrong in the outdoors, your trip has changed drastically.
Yeah.
Leather gloves, they're heavier than other types of gloves. That's something I won't change out. And
Yeah.
that I know what works for me. So there's that. Water filtration. I don't filter water. I just take iodine.
Oh, wow.
The small ones. And I've had water from a creek, very small creek in Peru, where there is gonna say sloth and snake guts from lunch and dinner in the same water, but iodine works. It works. And in the Philippines, the resident our water source was this little, it was a large creek, kind of a river, and you couldn't get the water buffalo out of the source.
Oh my God.
So you get your water anyway, and
Ugh.
iodine in boiling, or usually I'll do one or the other. I don't ever do both.
Really?
But yeah, I've never been sick on any overseas trip, any backpacking trip, any trip abroad, period, to date. And I do several of them.
Yeah.
So iodine, it works. You can get some nasty water locally. You don't have to go that far from it. So iodine, I use that. I have a bandana. I always have orange or blue cotton, colorful, loud bandana. It serves many purposes.
So you're filtering out the big stuff.
If I have to, yes. There was one trip we did in New York where there was a seasonal pond, and from far away we can see it. It was amazing. It was great. And it was like super nice looking from a distance. But when you actually get there, you have to go through about 50 meters of the nastiest, darkest, blackest water. And they all were hiking with 3 liters. That's like 9 pounds of water.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hike with 9 pounds of water. I'm not. If I'm in the desert, yes, I was not in the desert. So to drink water, I had to break the surface and walk into this nasty bit. And the 2 guys with me, they can definitely, they can attest that when that surface of the water broke, the smell was of rotten. Ooh, it was. I don't know how graphic I can get, but
as graphic as you want.
It smelled like pure feces.
Oh.
And I could see these very prehistoric looking like water bug roaches in there climbing around, and it was nasty, awful. So I filled up that platypus with as much of that water as I could get. I have photos of it. I'm going to post them now. I think you're going to make me post them. And it was about the nastiest looking water I have come across. I've come across a lot of nasty water, and it was just in New York. So I said, this is going to be my drinking water for the day. Oh. And all I did was put a bandana down and put it through the bandana. You wouldn't believe how clear it was on the other side. And I would have to, people don't think they have to do this, but you have to change that bandana up and rub it against a rock or a tree to get as much of the junk off of it.
Yeah.
Or use another section of it and keep filling it up. Once it was in the can, it was pretty clear. There were no particles, and I boiled it once it got to a rolling boil, I just let it go for a minute. That was it.
Yeah.
Fine. There was nothing wrong with that at all. And to me, that was not like a big deal. But if I would have put a filter in that water, it probably would have clogged up in no time at all. And this has happened to us several times.
Sure.
In parts of the world where you have swamp water as your main source, and it's pretty useless. It could be the most useless piece of gear if it freezes or clogs or breaks. You're still carrying it with you. So I don't have a water filter. Yeah. I don't think that's all as far as gear. I have a small AAA Streamlight that I made my own little elastic bandana to clip it to for a light source. I keep a very small little thing of tissue with me. I don't have a lot of things as far as first aid. Okay, I have duct tape and like a Neosporin. And if I can't stop it with duct tape, then it's beyond the realm of what you can really carry. That's people think a Band-Aid or several Band-Aids are going to do anything for you in the outdoors, but it doesn't take much sweat, moisture, humidity to make a Band-Aid just fall right off. So to me, that is a useless item beyond useless. I could see it being used if you put it on initially and then a piece of duct tape over it. Sure. So duct tape is not on your wounded part, your injured area. But besides that, there is not a Band-Aid I've ever come across that will stay on for more than a day in the outdoors. So that is ridiculous to me. There are several things that just don't belong in a survival kit or that give you a false sense of security. And I think first aid stuff is definitely, I'm just not a big believer of it. If you have a really bad cut or snake bite, there's nothing in your pack. You need primary care. You don't need to, ruffle through your gear. So, and there's something about cuts in the outdoors, and that is a big thing. I've been cut worse than anything in Australia, Port Douglas up north, just trying to get a really good photo of a crab, losing my balance, catching myself, and this rock slit me so bad on the wrist.
Oh, wow.
It was literally squirting out.
Oh.
And so one thing to be said about certain types of bleeding is that 10 minutes of really direct, hard pressure, 10 minutes, not looking to see, is it still bleeding? No, 10 minutes of just uninterrupted, hard pressure will stop most injuries except for an arterial bleed. That's a whole different thing.
Little different.
So, right. So there you go. Bandana, duct tape, some kind of Neosporin, which may or may not work right away. That's it for first aid. That right there is probably about 3.5 pounds. I don't know if I'm forgetting something. In the winter, I do carry a thicker pair of socks to sleep with at night to change out. I always have a 1 ounce beanie that I carry with me. It's 1 ounce fleece beanie, covers my ears. So that's part of the gear setup. That's it. I don't carry a lot of stuff.
That's a very minimalistic setup, but
it's worked for me. I've never been in a situation where I've needed anything more than that.
Yeah, no, it's great.
But I do carry a possibles pouch just to throw in there. A possibles pouch that has my ferro rod and my Swiss Army knife. And that's not part of my backpacking kit because it's got no business detached from me. It should always be on me with a whistle. And that's it, really. Very simple stuff.
Reuben, so I know you've done some knife designing, both for Tops and for Essie. So I'd love to hear about that process and how you came up with the designs and, the structure of it, the materials and all of that.
Right. So the first knife that I did design for, I would say, a big company, besides custom makers. I've had custom makers make some of my designs before, but the first thing that I guess I put my name on was with Tops Knives. And I definitely wanted carbon steel, 1095 steel. I've always been a huge fan of Tramontina machetes and Mora knives, and they're very simple 1095. Although it's supposed to be some type of mystery in the industry, it's 1095 steel. We're not fooling anybody. And just it being a good, hardworking steel, I know I wanted that or O1 steel. You won't get production companies using O1 steel too often. I do believe Spyderco does on certain models. But so 1095 for me was going to be it. and I wanted something that would keep it under 4 inches, because that gets me by in a lot of countries where you get in 4 inches, you get in 6 inches. Now it looks like a dagger. Now it's a weapon. So something small and manageable was in my head. And this goes for both knife designs. But if we start with just the tops cub, I had done several trips to Scandinavia, kind of broad to say Scandinavia. So I'll say Finland, Sweden, Norway. Mm-hmm. And they use knives more than I believe North Americans do on a daily basis for their way of life. And they favor a large beveled knife, which is known as a Scandi, mm-hmm. chisel or double chisel, whatever. Scandinavian grind has a very large bevel, one part sharpened on each side. There's no guesswork in the angle or whatever. You can feel it and see when it's hitting the stone or the leather if you want to strop it. So that was big to me, because at the time that was one of the only knives I could really sharpen with success were Mora knives of Sweden. And so I wanted a Scandi type of grind. I say type of grind because at the time, Tops was not doing 0 degree Scandi grinds. They were doing like a Scandi Vex. And I liked it all the same because I like convex edges too. And when you get it down enough and you sharpen it enough, it will just be a true 0 degree Scandi grind. So for me, I knew I wanted 1095. I knew I wanted it to be about 3 3/4 of an inch long in the blade. I wanted it no thicker than 1/8 of an inch. I would prefer 3/32, but no production company at the time was doing 3/32 in anything for obvious reasons. So I went with 1/8 of an inch thick, and uncoated 1095 was important. I did not want a coating on it. And when Mike Fuller, then the founder and president of Tops Knives, approached me about it, this was after several years of me writing about Tops Knives in several publications and using them over years. He said, well, he wanted to have a phone conversation, and that's usually when it was something important. And he wanted me to come up with the design. And at that time, a lot of writers in the industry had their own design first in with Tops. And so it just seemed like it was my turn next or something. And I told him I don't see anything wrong with the knives that are out today for me to come up with my own. Like, why? This is great. This has been going for a long time. What am I going to add? There's nothing new under the sun, as they say.
Yeah.
So I didn't really want that. He talked me into it. He was very persuasive in that way. And it was strange, but for some reason I agreed under one condition, that they don't print my name on the actual knife. And he was willing to say okay to that. And at the time, there were several guys in the industry that do a lot of the same things that had their name on it. And I didn't want my name on it. So they accommodated that and got the prototype, and it was pretty good. I remember sitting down with Leo, who is now the president of Tops Knives, the main guy, El Jefe. And I just remember, like a sketch artist, describing it to him and him just writing it out. I'm like, that's it. Wow, that's amazing. It's like he got in my head, and I liked it right away. It was compact. It's a compact utility blade, just like the acronym CUB, not combat utility blade, like some people like to joke around and say it is. So that was my first experience with the big company, and getting a royalty off of it, putting my name on something. Well, it was in the literature, the description, not so much on the blade.
Yeah.
Not too long after that, SE Knives, there was talk about doing a series that kind of took a bit of a turn from the regular lineup of the SE3, SE4, SE5, SE6, Azula, which all have somewhat of maybe law enforcement, tactical, military, also outdoors kind of look. This line of knives was going to be geared towards the backpackers, the woodcrafters, the bushcrafters, guys that don't need the black coating, that want a 90-degree spine as another tool. And the Camp Lore edition was born from that. SE Knives. You might be familiar with them. They basically are using instructors and people in the know. At one time, Dave Canterbury had a design in it. It never really went all the way to production, but people in the industry that have done something in the industry, teaching, just been contributing to the outdoors industry and been using SE Knives were used to design, like James Gibson, Patrick Rollins, and Cody Rowan, Ashley Emerson, myself. So that was going to be a different face of SE Knives. Mm-hmm. And it was something very different for the company to come out with uncoated 1095, leather sheaths, a 90-degree angle, and on my model to have a Scandinavian grind. These were all new things for them, and they did it quite well. I'm happy. I still use today. Yesterday, I still use my original one. It's not really the prototype; it's the first production. The first prototype I actually gave away at a blade show. Oh, wow. A drawing. Yeah, I'm not really attached to gear and equipment and things like that. So for me to give it away was like, "You sure you want to do that?" Yeah, I can get another one.
Nice.
And that was interesting because you naturally take what you did last and you try to improve on it or change it up a little bit. And I really was proud of the handle for the SE RB3 knife, mm-hmm. Just because it was like two knives in my head, the most comfortable knives I've ever used. One is a Mora model number 1, classic. And another one was the ML's version of a Kephart knife, which was very contoured, rounded. Nothing said you have to put your finger here. It was like a blank canvas.
Sure.
And it was comfortable in that way. And I think we ended up with a broomstick style handle that is universal with the RB3, and the way, the Rowans were able to do the handle where it was rounded. And at that point, every knife that they had done had flats, mm-hmm. flat sections of the scale. So it was quite a big step for everybody involved with the company. And it was interesting, cool to be part of that process.
Yeah. No, that's great. Reuben, we're coming up on time here, but just a couple other quick questions. What outdoor brands do you see are doing just a great job of product quality these days?
Well, I would have to say one of them that I don't know if it would interest so much of the survival industry people as much as the backpackers and travelers is Gazmer Gear. They have been a brand I've been using for a very long time for backpacking, for traveling, for hiking. Very good quality overall products. I use them. I still use them in the backgrounds of photos for magazines and good, reliable, lightweight stuff. Uberleben is a company that is not exactly new anymore. They've been around a few years, but they just consistently put out durable, good gear, very robust. I've had several pieces of their gear that I hiked them out to the forest one time and they never made it back. They're cached out there in my semi-permanent camp, and I got them hidden or up in a tree and someplace where I use them. And I do a lot of gear testing, as you know. So one of the best types of gear testing is neglect and seeing how it's going to react outdoors over a certain period of time. I've had amazing results with them in every way. And I found a lot of their gear to be multifunctional, not just one-dimensional, like one of their pots. They have a pot that's metal, all metal. I have one with paracord handle, but it has a wooden lid lifter, I guess.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is it makes an excellent impromptu cutting board. And when you cut, now you're just looking for a surface that is not going to damage your knife blade. So when you cut food on it, the way the rim of the lid is it kind of keeps food on. So if you're cutting, let's say vegetables or pieces of sausage, it is not going to roll past that point. So it kind of keeps it together. And that is something I don't think they did that well on purpose. It just looked cool and it was a safe way to lift your lid. But it is another thing you can do, and another way you can just make some quick cuts. So that was multifunctional. That top of that lid, it unscrews, leaving just a little bit, sticking out of the thread of the screw. Now you have an all metal piece that is like a Dutch oven. Now you can bake it, put coals on top. So something like that, I look at and think that it could do a whole lot more than just be a pot or a kettle. So I think they do a really good job. Tough Possum Gear, they do a lot of really interesting pieces of gear with a great backstory. I do consider Jay Berry one of the good guys in the industry, and just a good guy. Great history with how he got started making gear, and starting with machines from his grandmother and his father, and just great story. And he puts out a lot of multifunctional pieces of gear, like a sit pad, which is great for fanning the flames. It's good for hiding tinder in. And it's good for putting something that you want to stay flat. You can store it inside there. It's good for sitting on. I use backpacks that don't have a frame. They're frameless. So putting that in the back gives me a little bit of a frame. And it's not, what if I have a little skillet or something that I'm taking, or like a knife handle, it's not jabbing me. And it just does a lot for you. You could put that under your feet in super cold weather as you're sleeping at night, and it's enough to keep you insulated. Because it opens at the top, you could stuff more things in there if you wanted to. So it's just full of great uses. That's only one piece of gear they have. I've had the luxury of using several pieces of their gear, and it's just top notch. So that's Tough Possum Gear. A lot of good companies out there. So many. I could just think of Wazoo Survival Gear making a big splash. Good stuff. Things you can wear, useful, and just great products, great overall marketing, everything. Another company, I'd look out for them. Rewild. Yeah, I'd look out for those guys. They got a few tricks up their sleeve.
Got some cool things coming up.
You guys do. I almost want to put you on the spot and ask you about the Gazmer 3. I don't know where it was. I was reading or listening to maybe your podcast I was listening. Is that where you mentioned that?
Yeah, so that's something we're talking about. It's just kind of in the design phase. We're trying to figure that out. So the Gazmer, what we're tentatively calling the Gazmer 3, would be a shortened version of the current Gazmer 4 with a different steel, probably either LC200N, or we're looking at the new Chromag as well. Some of those, and would be more like a river runner / dive knife. So it's going to be more water oriented. So like if you're a rafting guide or canoeing, kayaking, or just even diving, something that's a little bit smaller, but still kind of a similar blade profile. So we are currently, playing around with that, but nothing definitive yet.
Cool.
So
we'll stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be sure to look out for it. Who knows? I may end up putting it on the cover of a magazine one day.
There you go. Yeah, because the Gazmer 4 is going to be
it's
magazines here pretty soon.
It's going to be in 2. It is already submitted for American Frontiersman magazine.
Super.
I got the chance to do a whole just an overview on your company, your brothers, and there's a lot of great things on your website, great wording to kind of grab and throw in, and so that's going to be all the gear you have. And Knives Illustrated is going to run Gazmer 4 and the grill. It's going to be geared toward camp cooking, so those two go well together. And I was doing some more. I checked on it yesterday. As I told you, it's been buried in the snow, and I in the sheath and then outside of the sheath. And
how's it looking?
It's looking good. I have visual aids I'll share with you.
Great.
And I will do some more with it this week, because that is going to be my deadline is March for that. Okay.
Yeah,
and,
wonderful.
And then I think EDC Magazine, I'm going to be able to put your bellows, your firelight, your ferro rod, and the pyro balls.
Yeah.
All in one. It's just going to be an EDC.
Cool.
Fire in the pocket pants, hot pants. I'm working on it. I'm working with it.
Got it.
So that'll be at least 3 articles on the.
Yeah, we're excited about that.
Me too. Me too. It's good gear. I've been
thanks for that.
Pleasantly surprised with it.
Yeah. Reuben, is there a book or books that you've read over the years that have just really impacted your life?
That's implying I can read. Yes, I'm gonna throw it out there, and it's probably one you've heard from people like me. I would say one of the first books that really got me going is is the John Lofty Wiseman SAS survival book. It's a standard. I had the very small pocket version. Years later, my brother had the larger version, and it has more photos and just a little more content in there. That was a good book to have right off the bat, where you have sections. You can look up just camp craft. You can look up shelters, and I've always geared toward tool use and shelter type of stuff. So I'd say John Lofty Wiseman. Favorite, probably long resonating book is going to be DC Beard. His Shacks and Shanties is great, and it's published sometime in the early 1900s. But by far, the two that come to mind, Camp Lore and Woodcraft, and then there's Camping and Woodcraft. There's all different versions of that between Horace Kephart and George Sears Nesmuk.
Yep.
George Sears Washington Nesmuk. Super, super huge. I can recite passages from them to fit most occasions. I often do and quote them in magazines. I think the things they were saying back then still holds water today. And Horace Kephart, his book has just become the encyclopedia, the go-to.
Yeah, the classic.
It is. I have one from 1912. I also have another version from 1917 or 1918. I know my friend Patrick has probably all different versions of it. But his design of knife, the fact that he really fancied, so he says, an 8-ounce headed tomahawk. I have so many tomahawks. The lightest one I have is 10 ounces, so I don't know. But I guess
interesting.
Yeah, and he used to call it his little trick, his little camp trick. And
maybe a product opportunity for you there.
Well, it's definitely been done. There is some kind of literature of the Coal Cluster brothers. These brothers coming out with gear, Yeah. So those books I would definitely and I have to say, Bushcraft from Morris Kohansky, the late great. That was a 1986 publication, but I think that is the best book that describes saw, axe, hatchet, and knife use. It is, he says, the most amount of information in such a small passage. That is hard to do, and I really like it.
Yeah.
As far as knife use and how to, that is the book. If somebody said, what's the best knife use book? That is it. And I like how he stresses just how most people gravitate toward it. I'm a fan of what works. I'm not a fan of this technique, but most people gravitate toward using their thumb on the spine to do a lot of things. And I don't think I have in probably 12 years. And it's just the way he describes it and why. And I really think that impacts the way people make their feather sticks, fuzz sticks, whatever you want to call them. Thumb on the spine is usually the one reason why they don't stay on the stick. And I like just his thoughts about the knife blade, the thinness, the handle, and the diagrams in the book. Onto saw use, his explanation of it is great. It's safe. And he goes on to saying that it is one of the only safe ways you can use a tool in the dark if you had to, and probably the only safe cutting tool a blind person could use. Wow. Or somebody who has had eye damage in the outdoors. So that's a very good point. Saw. That being said, I've been cut worse and more often by a saw than any knife or edge tool ever. And if you've ever been cut by a saw, it doesn't leave an easy to fix cut. You can't just sew it up. It's quite jagged, like a jack-o'-lantern took a bite out of you. But yeah, definitely Bushcraft, Morris Kohansky. That is a huge book for me.
Well, we'll get all those added to the show notes. Reuben, this has been so much fun. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, I would say when it comes to outdoor skills, whether it be travel, recreational, hiking, camping, do it. Do it more. Do it often. The more you do it, the more you'll like it. You'll enjoy it. I'm going to quote something off your website. You guys mentioned that you believe the more people spend time outdoors, the the better people they are. Something to that effect. I probably butchered it. And that rings true. I'm glad that I saw that on your website, because I might even use that in a class or something. But that is good advice. You see studies of that. You see stories of that too. It is probably like laughter. The next best free medication for anything is to be outside, to be outdoors. Something about it. It sets you back in a way where you could just kind of be in that moment of something as simple as the sound of the creek, or the odd sound ice makes when it's kind of settling and thawing out. These things you don't see every day or hear every day. And so there are so many great things and benefits that the outdoors has to offer. And I don't just mean the mountains, the woods. I'm talking a desert. I'm talking just the rainforest, everything. There's so much out there, and take it to the next step and see how many mushrooms you can spot. And just remember, every mushroom is edible once, at least once. It's a great.
And some are more fun than others,
right? That's what they say. It's a great opportunity if you are interested in any type of photography. You can do that. You don't need a camera for that. Phones these days. Get out in the woods. There's so many natural and unnatural art shapes, weird occurrences in nature that you can't even duplicate, if you tried. So just yesterday I was taking a lot of photos of weird ice on this creek.
Oh, cool.
Looks like somebody was painting. I advise to people who want to get into the outdoors is just to keep doing it. Do it with a friend. Do it in any way you possibly can. If it's skills you want to do, take the time to improve on it. Do it slowly. Don't try to jump in. Let YouTube be your friend, a guide. Let books confirm it and other people. Try it. See what works. Most importantly, make all the mistakes you can in a controlled environment, whether it be your backyard or a car camp or something, because those mistakes are going to lead to all the successes, whether it be gear or skills related.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It's fantastic advice. Reuben, just to close up here, where can people learn more about you online if they want to follow you and catch up?
Really, I'm just on Instagram right now. I don't have a website. I don't really sell anything. Just a bunch of BS. So yeah, Instagram, just my name, ReubenBolieu. And I have an adventure food guy, which is just the culinary side of my endeavors.
Sure.
I just post travels, videos of food and pictures of food abroad, and just a lot of things I make on a regular basis and make in the outdoors. That's one of my favorite parts about being in the outdoors is cooking.
It tastes better over an open flame.
Sure does. Yeah.
Indeed. Wonderful. Reuben, thanks so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate your time. And for all of you listening, stay wild.
Thanks for listening to the Rewild Gear Podcast. You can check out the show notes for today's episode at rewildgearpodcast.com. If you're ready to spend more time in the wild, our line of high-quality, minimalistic outdoor gear can help you do just that. Check us out at rewildgear.com.